This happened back in 2016, but it still gives me the creeps. Let me set the scene. It's a Friday night in Edinburgh, and I'm skipping down the road looking forward to the highlight of my week. Sticking on replays of King of the Hill and ordering a fish and chips. I put a tenner on the heating, find a solid King of the Hill playlist on YouTube, and order my food. It's gonna be another spectacular Friday night, hopefully. Now it's worth mentioning that this was December in Edinburgh, so there was a lot of snow and I expected the food to take a little longer than usual. However, hours passed and it never arrived. No worries, I'll just cancel the order and make some pasta or something. I get a knock on the door at 1:30 a.m, which was a little weird as I didn't buzz anybody into the building. I look through the people and there's the delivery driver. I opened the door and he began to profusely apologize for the delay in the food order and explained he felt bad and wanted to check if I wanted the food anyway. I told him I understood and it wasn't a problem and took the food. I thought that was the end of what seemed like the happy matter, but it was not. At around 2 a.m, I get a text message saying, "I really liked your sweatshirt." I respond saying thanks, "But who is this?" He replies, "It's your delivery driver." At this point, I'm pretty annoyed at the nerve of this man, but also spooked as it was clear I lived alone and this man had sauntered straight into my building. I can't remember everything that was said, but it's more or less along the lines of, "So how's your night?" and various other, fairly inoffensive messages to which I did not respond. The scary part is waking up at 3 a.m. to a series of missed calls with the message in the middle saying, "I'm outside your building. Do you want to hang out?" I'm seriously shitting bricks at this point, so I don't manage to get back to sleep until around 7 a.m. in the morning. Thankfully, I never heard from him again. I've since changed my sacred ritual and my country of residence. This happened back when I was 17 and living in a small rural village. I had been at a friend's all evening watching films and chilling, and I left to go home around 11 p.m. It was quite a long walk back to mine, as she lived on the outskirts of the village down some back roads. I felt pretty safe, as when it got to a certain time of night it was quiet. You wouldn't bump into anybody, and there would hardly be any cars on the road, especially at that late hour. It was weirdly peaceful. Where I lived was a large avenue with 2 big blocks of houses, like 2 big circles that you would get to after following a small dark road that consisted of a few large old houses and a vicarage. As I am passing the vicarage, I see this little beat up red Nissan coming towards me. The closer it gets, the more it slows down, and the guy is nearly breaking his neck trying to look at me. I mean, there is nothing subtle about it. It nearly came to a full stop as it drew alongside me and I started to panic. There was not another soul there, just me and this strange guy. I was determined not to get myself in a tiz, so I picked up the pace and refused to look at him. As far as I know, he drove off. I continued walking home, which was literally a 5-minute straight line from there, and I kept listening out for a car engine. I was vigilant of any headlights creeping up behind me. I heard nothing and saw nothing. I started breathing a sigh of relief as I could now see my house. I walked in and locked the door and saw my mom standing in the living room chatting on the phone. I'm trying to interrupt her conversation, telling her about the weird guy in the red car, when for some reason she goes to the front window and peeks through the curtain and she takes the phone from her ear and says, "What, that car?" This is all in a minute since walking through the door, and I'm thinking to myself, it can't be him, because if he had followed me, I would have heard the car. Before I even get a chance to look for myself, there is a knock at the front door, so I go and answer it, only pulling it open a few inches, and there is a guy stood there empty-handed wearing like a baseball cap. It was the same guy in the same car, and I'm just like, what the fuck? I say, "Can I help you?" "Did you order a pizza?" he asked me, and I'm like, "No, I think you have the wrong house." Taking a step towards me, he says again in a not fucking around kind of tone, "No." I said, "Did you order a pizza?" Before I reply, my mom has come up behind me, opens the door fully and says, "Is there a problem?" This causes him to back up, mumbling, "I must have the wrong address," before he gets in his car and takes off. Sure to say, we were both a bit spooked and made sure everything was locked up properly. When I was 14, my dad and I lived in a small studio apartment on Hollywood Beach in Florida. We hardly had any money, but we treated ourselves to takeout every other Thursday night from the same Chinese place a few blocks away. They were family run, so the same guy came to deliver the food every time. We found out later he was the adult son of the woman who owned the restaurant. It was my job every other Thursday to answer the door and pay for the food while my dad found something on TV for us to watch while we ate. And never once did this unassuming Asian guy ever give me a reason to feel uncomfortable. He was short and tan, with gray hair and glasses. I was friendly but not talkative. At 14, I was still in my shy stage. We never had a conversation other than the typical hello and have a nice day. During that time, I was left home alone a lot. Both my dad and I felt like 14 was old enough to spend a few hours home alone in the afternoons after school. I was also very close with the woman who lived next door and her goddaughter, so I would spend a lot of time over there when my dad wasn't home. I walked home from school as well, and it was one school day afternoon, after an hour or so after I had gotten home, that the phone rang. This was about 2004, so having a house phone was still really common. Ours was set up on the side table in the main room of the studio apartment. I answered it, and for a second I thought there was going to be no one on the other end because there was a long pause. Then a sort of stammering that I couldn't understand. Then, "This is Alan," which was barely understandable because of the heavy Asian accent. I say Asian because I'm not sure if it's okay to assume they were Chinese just because they ran a Chinese building. By now you obviously know that Alan is a Chinese delivery guy. But at this point, 14-year-old me is confused. Who the hell is Alan? I say something along the lines of, what? And he clarifies, "Your delivery guy, Chinese delivery." Now I'm even more confused. What does Alan the delivery guy want? He goes, "Did you, order food?" "No, we did not." And I tell him so. He is quiet for another second or so. Then, Are you home alone?" My heart dropped into my stomach. Now I'm pretty sure I know what Alan the delivery guy wants. And yes, I was home alone. But I wasn't about to let him know that. My first instinct was to tell him my dad was home. But his work van wasn't outside, and I realized that Alan had been to our house enough over the last few years to know my dad's van, and if he drove by, he would know he wasn't home. "My uncle is here," I say, and I immediately think it's a horrible attempt at a lie, and Alan is gonna know that. "Why?" I challenged him. He is again quiet for a moment, then a statement, not a question. "You are home alone." I am stunned, and have no idea what to say now, as I'm trying to think of something. "Never mind," he says, and hangs up. I'm so weirded out and scared at this point that even though part of me thinks I actually scared him out of whatever he had planned, another part of me says go lock all the doors, so I do, front and back. By the time I get back to the front room from locking the back door, I look out the front window and see a car parked in the driveway. It's Alan, just sitting in his car. The windows are rolled up and lightly tinted, but I see him behind the steering wheel, just staring at my front door. 30 seconds later, the house phone starts ringing again. I don't answer it. Alan stays parked in the driveway for about 5 more minutes. I stand looking out the window the whole time, thinking to myself that the second he got out of the car, I was gonna grab a knife from the kitchen. The house phone starts to ring one more time. I don't answer it. As soon as it stops ringing the second time, I pick it up and dial 911. I was terrified, but not because of Alan. I was afraid my dad was going to be angry with me for calling the police. It was a completely different story, but he and the law have not always been on the same side, and I was raised with a sort of subliminal aversion to the police, and the idea that anything I couldn't handle myself, my dad could handle for me. Alan drove away while I was on the phone with the 911 operator. I was in the middle of telling her he was calling the house and parked in the driveway, when he just put the car in reverse and sped down the street. The police took a statement from me when they got to my house, then sent me next door to hang out with the neighbor and her goddaughter. We sat on the front porch and I told her the story of what happened, while the officers went down to the restaurant to talk to Alan and contact my dad. In the end, Alan was able to get off with the warning by telling the officers that there was a confusion and he thought that we had ordered food, which his mother confirmed. When asked why he wanted to know if I was home alone, he said he was trying to get an adult on the phone. The police told him that they'll have to have someone else make deliveries to customers in my area from now on, and to make sure that Alan keeps his distance. In all honesty, I think it was my dad's phone call to the restaurant later that really made Alan realize he had fucked up, and not the warning from the cops. He was fuming when I told him the story, as I imagine most fathers would be. He called the restaurant and spoke to the woman who owned the place first, then somehow convinced her to put Alan on the phone. What followed was one of the greatest conversations I have ever heard, even if it was only my dad's side I was hearing. Nothing makes you feel more loved than your dad in macho protection mode. My dad threw insults that I had never even heard before. I knew it was a very serious situation, and I knew that my dad was really angry, but I was in the background stifling my laughter into a pillow. At one point my dad asked Alan what the fuck he was thinking driving over here, to which Alan responded something about being lonely. We stopped eating Chinese after that.